That's the pitfall, right? If I go to a
Yeah.
website and I go and buy something, let's just say I'm going to go buy a scarf at scarfsrus.com. This isn't a big company. It's very clear it's not a big company when I go to their website. But I assume that they have done the bare minimums to secure my credit card when I buy my scarf. I assume that the developer on the other end of that scarf website has done what they need to do to protect my stuff. And the sad part is that's not true. It's just not. A lot of startups, small companies, and again, I mean, if you're using Shopify or whatever, that's not what I'm talking about. Those guys will lock it down. It's all good stuff. But if you are building an app from scratch and you have to collect sensitive stuff, and there's no guarantee that they're doing it right. Now, you might even see the little lock up at the top. That means SSL.
HTTP.
Yeah, and you need that. That's a bare minimum. But all that does is protect your data when it's transferring from your browser to their website. That little lock says no one can steal that. Great. Bare minimum stuff. But once that developer has that data in their hands, they have responsibilities to treat it correctly. In most cases,
data
for instance,
has to go from the browser into the system that you're purchasing from, and then
correct,
put somewhere
or it gets
else
passed
as
to
well.
a third party.
Right.
So that, right, without going in too far of the weeds, but there's stuff called PCI compliance, which is how you secure credit cards. And I'm using that just because it's a common thing. Nothing I've mentioned is actually credit card data. But when you pass through that credit card, you have to do it in a certain way so that Visa doesn't shut you down. That's what PCI compliance is. And if you're using something like Stripe, which is the largest credit card processor for developers, they have a way that says if you follow these steps, you will be safe and that credit card will be safe. And the sad part is that if you're an amateur, you might not take the time to do that correctly. And that's what I find. So the invisible pitfall that I'm talking about that really kind of lit me up when we were talking about it is you've got to know who you're talking to, and you've got to you got to be confident that they know how to take care of you in whatever way it is.
There's a thing where, okay, if you're trying to get your business off the ground and you've found a developer, either a contractor or a team or whatever, and you're trying to save money, but you kind of expect that developer would understand these things and know how to handle that. But then maybe the developer team would kind of just think, well, we don't really know exactly what's supposed to happen with, I guess, either credit cards or sensitive information. But then again, the founder never really asked us about it, so I guess we're okay. You know what I mean? So there's like a gray area in there where if you don't know, you don't ask, or if it was not asked of you, you don't go the extra mile to do it. So this is where like the amateur versus pro thing kind of comes into play.
If you've never done that, like if you've never done recurring transactions, I promise you're going to do it wrong the first few times.
Yeah, unless you're using a third-party system that's already established. But if you're building something
even if you're
yourself,
using a third-party system, I will tell you most developers, the first time that they do recurring payments through something like Stripe, very well established, they're going to do it wrong. Not because Stripe did something wrong, but because you didn't read all the docs, because you haven't figured out. I mean, what happens when someone's credit card expires and that needs to be updated before you get charged the next time? Stripe has a process of doing that. What happens when you take the credit card and it succeeds initially, but it fails a minute later when they do their fraud checks? What do you do, right? There's weird stuff involved that if you've never done that before, you're going to do it wrong. We did. I'll be painfully transparent. We absolutely did it wrong the first time. And it took trial and error because that stuff is super complicated. Now, we're good at it now. That was a long time ago. But we had to learn it too. And so when you're building your dream, do you want your dream to be built by the first time, right? By a first timer, right? Oh man, this is my baby. I've been thinking about this idea forever. I'm going to give it to a guy who's never done it before. Really? But he's so much cheaper. Yeah, he is. And you're going to get just annihilated because you're going to go to raise money. And those investors are going to ask, what did you do on a security standpoint? And they're going to have a list because these investors know what they're talking about, dude, or most of them do. They know what they're talking about. They're like, hey, you're taking sensitive stuff. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to protect it? Well, show me what you're doing to protect it. I don't know. Yeah, you're not going to raise any money from that guy. So I don't know. I get really fired up about this because you get the, well, you know, I got another guy who's going to charge me a third of your price or half your price. All right, dude, you're going to get what you pay for. It sounds like I have an ulterior motive, right? Hire me because I'm more professional.
Well,
that's not what I'm saying.
Like, what would you say 3 things that you check for, our team checks for, whenever we are kind of evaluating code like this? If we're taking on a project that's already either half built or we're taking over something someone else built, or if we're being added to a team.
So what we ask our team when we're saying, hey, security is a big deal. What are you doing with sensitive information? Are you encrypting it? Is all sensitive information? And now sensitive could mean a lot of different things. If you're doing a HIPAA compliant, meaning medical, an email is sensitive, right? What they call it PPI, patient personal information, something like that. If you're doing HIPAA, everything, my first name is now sensitive. I need to be able to encrypt that because I need to make sure that this data is totally anonymized, right? So it's not necessarily a social security number or a credit card. It could be anything depending on your app. But hey, is that stuff being encrypted? Can you as the developer see it? Because that's a no-no. Like you should never, for day one, I don't care what your app is, no developer should see.
You mean like as if these were stored somewhere in like a spreadsheet available somewhere on,
in a database
on the server that you're looking at?
Correct. So if you're doing, if something's sensitive, like let's just say a password, a user password, those should be stored in such a way that the developers even themselves don't know what they are. Another thing is how secure is your database? Is it locked down? Can anybody get into it? Not even just name and password. Obviously that's there. But most databases are IP locked, meaning you have to unlock your IP address before you can use that. You can't connect to the database unless you are an approved IP address. That's very basic.
I was going to ask what unlocked IP means. So that means that the database actually already recognizes the IP address because it was given that IP address as like a permission in the beginning.
Yeah, it's like a whitelist. So it says, these are the 5 people who are allowed to log into my stuff, and here's where they live. Here's their IP address. And so even me, if I'm on vacation, I can't get into the database.
You can't get in remotely if you're not from the spot you need to be in.
You're supposed to be like you're blindfolded and you just hand it over. You're just passing it from one to the other, and you've never seen it. That's how it's supposed to be done. And most sensitive stuff can be done that way.
No, but if you do have any questions, comments, suggestions, or any topics you'd like us to cover, you can always hit us up at hello@thebigpixel.net.